host, Mark. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. This podcast is here for everybody on the open mic comedy circuit, whether you're a comedian, an MC, a promoter, or a tutor. Even comedy fans who enjoy watching the stars of the future in pub basements around the UK and the world. If you're thinking, I could do that, then this podcast will guide you on what to expect on this crazy circuit from those right in the middle of it. Today's guest is someone who prefers tomatoes out of the tin. He loves a pub quiz, but one that's not so aggressive with its questions. He might look a bit like a Rodney, but he's no plonker when it comes to telling jokes. He is 2024's finalist at G&B's New Act of the Year. Please welcome to the stage, it is Declan Evans.
Oh, I mean, that went on a bit, didn't it? The applause. Better than booze, anyway. But,
yeah, there is that.
Oh, brilliant. When you was reading that out, how long did it take you to write that? You've been studying me, ain't you? I was like, has he got the right bloke? And he said Rodney Trotter. I was like, right, fair enough.
I remember certain key parts of your set, such as the old the tomatoes in the tin. And,
sorry you see the same jokes over and over, but there you go.
You'll write some new ones someday.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
So how's it going?
Oh, yeah, I'm good, mate. Yeah. Yourself?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming round to my house. Welcome.
It's lovely.
Take your shoes off.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
This is going to be a bit of a crazy one for everybody else listening.
Do you reckon? Yeah.
So for people that don't know you, give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Well, I'm from. I don't really talk about it much, but I happen to be from Essex. I don't know, if I've ever come across on stage, but I'm sort of I'm early 20s, working a pub, which is I hear a few jokes in there. I tell you that's another podcast of its own. I tell you. So I did my first gig in 2021. To be fair, I always wanted to do stand-up. I can't remember, just as long as I can remember, really. It's funny because, obviously, for the listeners, obviously, when you're a guest on, this podcast, we get an email from Mark, just sort of saying, the sort of a brief outline of some of the questions we're going to. Sorry if I've ruined the magic for anyone, but no, when I read the sort of, it said, I'll talk about how you got started, what got you into stand-up. I was thinking to myself, I've never actually thought about this. I've never actually thought, how did I get into it? And then I was sort of thinking back. So growing up when I was sort of very young, my parents are sort of a little bit older than only slightly older than other sort of parents of kids my age kind of thing. More so my dad. My dad's 67, and your mum's 25, but no. So growing up, I was kind of, whilst all the other kids were sort of doing whatever they were doing on their Nintendo or whatever, I was watching Dad's Army and Norman Wisdom and stuff, and lots of great sort of classic comedies and whether it be stand-up sitcoms, films or whatever. And I suppose without me really knowing, it got me ticking, It sort of got me going a little bit for the comedy brain, Yeah, see, my mum, she worked in a theatre, in the box office. This is in Chelmsford, so we used to get all sorts of comedians coming to Chelmsford, and it was mostly not on tour, but kind of doing their sort of work in progress, hour-long stuff, And I saw loads of comedians there, because my mum used to sort of she used to see what was going on sale, and she'd get me a ticket, or maybe someone hasn't sold out or anything, not to mention any names or anything. I used to just sit at the back and just watch them, and I was like, Now don't get me wrong, I wasn't sat at the back thinking one day that will be me or anything like that. I just loved it. I really enjoyed it. There was one particular night, nothing to do with this comedian in particular, but it happened to be Russell Howard, who I saw. He was brilliant, and I just admired just how he was having so much fun up there. But also, I was about 14 years old. It was on a Tuesday night, and I had school the next day. And I just admired how just the freedom that he had. He could sort of go on to a different town or city the next day, and I had to go to school. And I think my journey on the way home afterwards, I was like, I'd rather do what he's doing, I think, And so there you go. I got into stand-up comedy because I didn't want to go to school the next day. There you go.
At what point did you think I'm actually going to do this? And, going on to the stage.
Do you know what? I think when I was when I was when I was about 14, I think that night definitely I decided that I was going to do it, because I just remember the next day I started writing jokes. I mean, they were rubbish. They were
Yeah.
really. I'll tell you what, if you think I'm bad now, but like. No, but this was, I found one of my old notebooks the other day. I was cringing at some of the stuff. It was just terrible, terrible material. And I kept nagging my parents saying, oh, like, will you take me to London, like, to do like an open mic? Was there anything out here, like, in Essex?
Yeah.
And I couldn't really find anything. And my parents, I think they was hoping it would go away. I mean,
Yeah.
especially my dad, he was like, yeah, he'll grow out of it, But thankfully, I was obviously too young to be sort of getting into actually doing stand up yet. But thank goodness as well, because I spent a good couple of years writing loads of rubbish, and then I did my GCSEs. I kind of joke about it on the stage, but I didn't do very well, with my GCSEs. And now you got to stay in education till you're 18. So I had to spend a couple of years at college doing sports science, and that sort of bought me a little bit more time, and I think I write my first decent joke when I was I think I was about 17 or something like that, and I've still yet to tell that particular joke on stage, but it wasn't really a one-liner. It was sort of, I had to describe it really. It was just different, But then that sort of got the ball rolling. I think, and then as soon as I remember now, as soon as I turned 18, COVID hit, and so I literally, as soon as I was ready, I was ready to go out and do gigs. COVID kind of put me back 18 months, I was sort of stuck indoors like everyone else. And if anything, that was a bit of a blessing really, like for me, because I was actually able to kind of like just stay at home and just start writing like loads of stuff. I was trying to get a job as well, but it was near impossible, or an apprenticeship or something. But I started writing some jokes, and the one-liners started coming in, just stuff that I've been inspired by really. May 2021, that was my first gig, and it was just sort of everyone was kind of going back into the real world, and and then it all sort of just took off from there really.
So where was the first ever gig?
The Cav.
Oh, okay. I think that's a lot of people's first one, isn't it?
Yeah. I chat to people all the time. They say like that's their first gig as well. But I remember that because I went there, and then I was so nervous. I used to get really, really bad. I did like 6 gigs in 2 years, and I used to get so nervous. If I saw that I had a gig in 2 months' time, it felt like tomorrow. I mean, now I don't even think about it 2 minutes before I go on stage. You know what I mean? Like I don't worry about it at all. But back then I was just, and like I said earlier on, you just don't learn anything from doing, a gig every 3 months or something like that.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So fast forward to like early 2023, and I did a gig in the Angel in Islington. And I remember I was supposed to do 7 minutes or something, and I came off after 5. I was so inexperienced. It was like my 7th ever gig, and I was like, do you know what? I need to take this more seriously. And I thought, like, if I really want to pursue this, I've got to really keep my head down and crack on now. Soon after that, I found GMB. And it all sort of took off from there. I'm sort of doing most of my gigs there, as you know.
I was going to say, you're a resident there now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Must be the only open micer with a residency.
No, but I love it. I really do. I think it's the best. I genuinely think it's the best one. Sort of like the amount that I've learned there is just like it's incredible. I'm a completely different comedian from when I first sort of stepped on stage there, and all thanks to Kyle. He's absolutely fantastic. I could sort of sit here all day and tell you all the stuff that like he helps me with my performance, like with where it be stage presence or just changing the wording of things here and there. But it's just it's been a massive help, and like he would say it himself, if you were to watch a sort of video of my first GMB gig to the most recent one, it's a completely different guy,
Yeah. If you stick at it long enough, you mature, don't you, on stage? And you're a bit more aware of what's going on.
Yeah, totally. It's like with anything, it sort of always sounds a bit cliche, but if it's what you want to do, you got to do it as much as you can. Just never give up. Just keep doing it as regularly. It's like with anything, you only learn by doing something over and over and over again. And it might feel a bit like, Groundhog Day, where you sort of like, you get up, you do a gig in the evening, you get up, you do a gig in the evening, over and over and over again. But, I've still got a massive buzz for it, and always will do. I think, I enjoy it so much. So
You said your first gig was at the Cav. How did that go?
It went. I won the little mini gold plastic trophy thing.
On the first go?
Yeah, yeah. I
Nice
mean, no one else turned up, but never mind.
Oh, that's fine.
No. Like, because you don't know what to expect. I'd sort of.
No.
There's one thing kind of stood in front of your mirror at home, sort of practicing beforehand. But when you I'll never forget that when I stepped on the stage, it was like I got this massive shockwave just went through my body. Like when I looked out and I saw the crowd staring back at me for the first time. I still get it sometimes, where you get a bit of a shock. I've got a video of it, and I can't watch it. I couldn't watch it then. I still can't watch it now. I sort of seen little bits of it. I can watch it for about 10 seconds, and I just start like cringing, But honestly, my stage presence. Now, obviously, like I should cut myself some slack. It was my first ever gig, but my stage presence was embarrassing. It was just like I kept like looking at the ground. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I had obviously I had one hand on the mic, which I was holding way too far away from my chin. And then my other hand, I didn't know what to do. And I had my fist like clenched in a really awkward I had to send you a picture of it. Yeah. But apart from that, it went really well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, my dad was there as well, which was nice, because you obviously have to bring a bringer with you. So, and I ain't got any mates, so. He loves going to the gigs, and that was great that he could kind of see that when he first gig. And
if anybody's been to any gigs where you've been I guess over the last year, probably 9 times out of 10, your old man's probably there, isn't he?
He's actually not. No. I think you saw me a couple of months ago, didn't you?
Yes.
Before that, it was quite a while.
Okay.
But I used to bring him. He only really it'll come if it's a bringer gig, He used to always come to like G&B like all the time. In fact, like I think every G&B gig I did up until like the new act competition, which I won, where you don't have to bring a bringer anymore with you. I reckon he probably comes along to a gig probably 1 in every like 10 gigs that I do now. So, he sort of, one of the things I always said to him was like, I say he's always welcome to come along. But the thing is, like, when he's there, he knows me so well. Like, believe it or not, he's my dad. But like, he knows me so well that it's sort of almost a bit of a distraction. And I do find I'm a little bit more, like, I don't know, a bit more sort of cautious or whatever. Like, I really don't want to sort of like, I don't know, like, I don't know how to describe it, sort of get me words wrong, forget where I am or something like that. Because then I know he's there, but then, I don't know.
No, I get it completely. I've got it with myself. If there's a few certain people that come, there's always that they don't come that often, so I want to impress them a lot.
Yeah.
But when they, then it makes me nervous even more. And then I'm start thinking about what's going on around. And then I start focusing on them. And then halfway through, it's like, no, ignore they're there. And it derails you slightly because I'm still in that stage where I'm not 100% comfortable. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. It's almost like, obviously when you look out at a crowd, there's going to be 1 or 2 people that but it's just going to be from the comedy world, and you're all in the same boat, But when you see, if it's a family member or a friend of yours, it's different. It's whatever person you are on stage, and whatever person other people in the comedy world see you as, that family member or friend sees you as someone else. And it's almost like getting into character when you do stand up, And it's like I was saying, like I was chatting about my dad, he knows me so well. He knows me like better than sort of anyone else. My parents know me better than anyone else. And when he kind of like sort of sees me going up on stage and doing the stand up, it's just like I'm a different guy altogether.
Yeah. I know. I think that's actually quite a good way of putting it, is that when you are on stage, the person on stage is not necessarily the person off stage.
Yeah.
And in the comedy world, you spend a certain amount of time with certain comedians, but you're still 2 comedians having a chat, so you're still in a comedy mode. But when you're with a family member, it's they don't see the comedy mode; they see you as you.
Yeah.
And it's quite odd. We all put on a kind of persona when we go on stage, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And I think that evolves as well. I think in your early gigs, you are still, I was Declan Evans trying stand-up comedy. Yeah. Now when I go on stage, I'm Declan Evans, the guy, the stand-up,
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like there's a certain point. I think it's like maybe around when you get to about 100 gigs where you start to think like, okay, letting Declan Evans, the comedian, take control whilst he's on stage,
Yes.
kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
so there's so many different like analogies that you could sort of like use as well to describe it. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I say, like you're when you're sort of like a different person on stage, I've still got to deal with the nerves beforehand, you know. But
Yeah.
as soon as I step on stage, I can pass it over to
So
to
Declan,
the
the
other
comedian.
guy. So it sounds like I've got like split personality now. But there you go.
So we're talking about being on stage and stuff. This is always a nice little icebreaker for people. What's your best and worst moments on the stage?
You see, the best moment, I can't think of a specific time. There are one or two that sort of come up, but I genuinely think that I mean, there's been a few gigs recently where I've sort of felt so relaxed on stage, where
Yeah.
I've sort of ad-libbed and I've had real fun with it. You know, if there's someone in the crowd that sort of, you know, something comes up earlier on in the night and you kind of refer
Yeah.
back to it. In those sorts of moments, especially when it gets a massive laugh when you go off piste as well,
Yep.
it's one of the best feelings. I think those are the sort of moments where I kind of like think this is brilliant because for a split moment, you go off the script and you're yourself. You know, you're just
Yes.
having a laugh like you're down the pub, you know. And
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of actual specific gigs, I mean like the All Stars final, that was like insane. You know, it was such a great night. You know, and it's like, I enjoyed it so much. A gig that actually sort of like comes to mind is I did a gig in a pub in Kent. It was in Bexley, and it was arranged by there's a guy called Tony Peters. Does stand up comedy, and that was his local pub. And basically, the landlady said to him, you know, you know, we hear that you started doing stand up. Do you fancy just sort of doing a comedy night down here? And so he asked a few people to come along and do it, and I was one of them. And I walked into this pub, and it was like this proper like geezer pub, you know. It's sort of like
Yes.
I've worked in these sorts of pubs, you know, and you walk in, and I was like, you know, all the like massive blokes at the bar, all sort of like having banter and all that. And I walked in, I saw Tony, I was like, oh, Tony. I said like, oh, where's the comedy happening? And he goes, it's in here. And I was like, oh, okay. And basically, it was a proper sort of like just your average pub, really. But I'd describe it as a
Yeah.
rowdy pub. It's not a rowdy pub, but it's just, you know, it was a proper working class boozer, and it was basically like someone just whacked a mic stand in the corner, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was on first in the second half. And I was a little bit nervous because during the first half, I was just sitting at the bar, just watching all the others. So, you know, they was getting on. What I noticed was like there were some comedians where if they didn't get the attention of all the people in the pub within the first 10 seconds, you know,
Yeah.
then everyone kind of in the pub just turns around to their mate and goes, "Oh, how's the missus, right?" And they and all that. Just starts
Yeah.
chatting, and I was feeling really nervous. I looked at this. There was this one particular bloke who was like massive, and he just looked so scary. On the other, like
Yeah.
down the other end of the pub, and I was looking at him, and he was sat at the opposite end of the bar. And I was thinking, oh gosh, you know, I've got to go up, and he looks like proper, like I'm proper scared. Like, you know, what are they gonna think of me and all that stuff. And I went up, and honestly, probably one of the best gigs I've done. You know, I went up there, first joke, got a massive laugh, and then,
Yeah.
and what I noticed was, you know, throughout the whole of the first half, like there was times where a comedian would be on the stage and like the whole pub would be chatting. No one would be
Yeah.
paying any attention to him. One really nice thing that I noticed was when I was up there, everyone's eyes were on me. And there was a
Yeah.
really nice moment where I think someone came in with their friend and they sort of like started chatting and someone shushed them, you know, because they wanted to listen to the kid.
Brilliant.
You know,
Yeah.
afterwards, I was chatting to all the locals and that. It was just so nice. They were so nice. And massive shout out, but I think the pub's called the Prince of Wales. This really scary guy that I was talking about earlier on, he come up to me and he shook my hand and he had a £20 note in it. And he said, get yourself a couple of beers. And I was like, that's, you know, and I was like, that's a story from Mark Cox's podcast, if I've ever heard one.
What about worst moments?
I don't, I've not really had like, not sound too sort of like funny about it or anything, but I've not had a sort of gig that I can think of where I think, yeah, it's definitely the worst one. Now, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
I've done a gig once where I performed to like silence for 5 minutes. That wasn't great, but
Yeah.
I won't mention where it was because it's not a reflection on like, you know, whether organised or anything like that. But no, I've had a few weird gigs. It's like I think one that comes to mind. I mean, I'm quite a sort of clumsy person, right? I accidentally set fire to myself for a gig once, and no, that's an exaggeration, right? But I remember once I was leaning on this bar, and it was in the Star Kings. Well, 3 words: candle, elbow,
Yeah.
me. Right? I was leaning on this bar and I was chatting away, but and I was thinking, I was going like, "Can you smell burning?" And I'm like, my elbow feels a bit hot as well. And I was leaning in this sort of like this candle, sort of, it was like this little dish. And I managed to just sort of like stop it last minute, but it left this mark on my sort of elbow. And
Yeah.
I got the dual view video for it. And when the camera shot goes to like behind where I am, where it looks out at the audience, you can actually see it. You can see the mark. And I'll send you a photo of that as well. But yeah. There's like another one that comes to mind. I remember at Arch One, there was quite a few deaf people in the crowd. They were there to see a deaf comedian,
Yeah.
and I can't remember his name. I had to try and think. I went up, I did the first joke, and it sort of got like a reasonable amount of laughter.
Yeah.
And I was half there. By the way, there was a sign language lady doing all the stuff for them, right? And
Yeah.
I was halfway through my second joke, and all of a sudden, it's like this laughter coming from about something. I'm halfway through my second joke, and I was going
Yeah.
like, "Where's that coming from?" And it sort of then I clocked on. Oh, it must be the obviously the sign language lady. By the time she's sort of told them what my punchline was
Yeah.
from the first joke, and it's like the third joke there was like a massive delay again. And I was like, and that was the most random amounts of laughter I've got. I'd get a laughter for the punchline and then a
Yeah.
laughter halfway through when I'm explaining like the build up to a joke or something. And this lady, she sort of sat there in the crowd going like that. To be fair, she was probably doing her own stuff. I don't know what she was saying. She's probably doing her own material. but yeah, no, so not like, I've got like, I remember I had a gig in Bristol, and I don't know if you can see on the camera there, I've got a scar on my forehead.
Right.
Long story short, I fell and just smashed my head on something, and I blacked out for like a good it was on the way back from the gig. Thankfully, I wasn't on the way there. It was a long old night, and I was sort of like I was there on the sort of platform, and I sort of blacked out for like 10 seconds. And then next thing I know is this guy in a high vis, and he kind of says, "Are you all right, mate?" I don't know, but I don't know what happened. But like, and then I had to spend the night in hospital. They got me on a train and put it back to like London, and I think it's Paddington, whatever, St Mary's Hospital, something like that. And I was just sat in like the sort of wait of it where they make you wait for about 4 hours, with like blood just gushing down my head, I think I had the same conversation with people like about 10 times in there, like small talk, like, "Oh, what happened to your head?" I was like, well, I sort of fell and hit my head, and they were going like, "Oh, all right, what were you doing?" I was like, I was on my way back from a gig, and I was like, "Oh, what a music gig?" No, a comedy gig. And they was going like, "Oh, who are you there to see?" And I was like, "No, I was actually performing." And then they was like, "Go on then, tell us a joke." And I was like, "Now's not the right time." But yeah, so just stuff like that, just being clumsy. So having unexpected stuff, like, you never know who's going to be in the crowd and all that. But yeah.
Yeah. I can join you at the Star Kings. I nearly killed myself at the Star Kings.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I nearly fell down the stairs.
Did you really?
The stairs that they go into the basement. I did.
I've done that a couple of times when I've had a drink.
Yeah, I was actually on Coca-Cola.
Oh, yeah.
I ended up. I did the Everything But the Gags workshop.
Yeah.
It's
brilliant.
And then he kept me on to do a gig. So I went upstairs, got a Coke, and as I'm going down the stairs, I don't know, a foot's just slipped, and I've had the moment where I've looked, and all I've seen is I'm going to hit that floor, I'm going to hit that step, and I've reached it. Everything literally went slow motion, and I've reached out and I've grabbed the handrail. Thank God that was there, and then I've kept the drink in the other hand.
Well, that's what matters, isn't it? As long as you get it.
The price of it in London, but it's when my foot slipped, it's like I've done a 40 towers doing the walk, and I've got my legs kind of gone up 90 degrees.
Yeah.
I've held onto a handrail and I'm trying to balance on one leg and hold a drink in another. I'm just like, honestly, I thought I'm gonna hit that in what must have been 1.5 seconds. I thought I'm going to hit that floor, and then Kyle's going to see me with blood gushing down my face, and me saying I'm not going to be able to perform.
Oh,
but
that's no
somehow I managed
excuse,
to stay
Mark.
upright.
Get off your ass, you know.
But God,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I think I ended up twisting my ankle or something as well, and yeah, those stairs were just lethal at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Oh, God,
But
yeah. I mean, you can fall up them if you're not careful.
so with your G&B stuff then,
Mm.
because you are such a resident there, how did you find the whole new act of the year competition? Because you got through the heats, then get through the semi-final, and then you placed, didn't you, in the final?
Yeah, so when I'd done my first ever G&B gig, I think Kyle said to me afterwards, "You should come back and do the new act competition like next month." And it was back then. It was like at the Albany somewhere,
Yeah.
and I think I did like that. I think I come second once, I came third once, came outside of the top four a couple of times, and then I think it was like something like my fifth attempt, about a year ago, and
Yeah.
and from there on in, so then you can kind of obviously you can go through to the All Stars, which is like once a year for G&B. It happens around March, April sort of time, I think. And as luck would have it, it fell on the 10-year anniversary of G&B, and yeah, what a great night that was. Well, firstly the semi final itself, I was looking at the lineup and I was kind of thinking like, it's just great to even just be here,
Yeah.
And then I was sort of thinking like, it don't really matter what happens. I just sort of try my best and then see what happens. I went out and it was the semi final. You was there, weren't you? I remember that.
I was going to say that today is a year to the day that you done the heat.
Okay. Oh, blimey,
Because I was there for that one because I competed. Yeah. But yeah, I was there for the semi final. Yeah. I flew in just to have a watch.
Yeah, no, that's fine, but I can't believe that. Oh, yeah, no, it was. I mean, that particular night. I mean, the crowd was actually. I remember the semi-final. It was a little bit of a cold crowd. I thought they were. It was a filled out room, but they kind of they took a while to get going, and even so, like when you go up there, they're not too sure about your first joke. They're a bit cautious, they're kind of like you get that. A few crowds kind of do that. A lot of the time it's how you deliver it. A lot of the time, I don't kind of warm myself up enough for the first joke, So, so this was a particularly sort of don't get me wrong, good crowd like overall. But like I just remember sort of if you listen back to some of the sort of laughter, there was some little bits in there where they weren't which didn't get a laugh, which usually does kind of thing. But overall, I thought it was it was a great kind of. I put in a decent enough performance, and I went to obviously like afterwards listening out for the results, and I kind of thought whatever happens, happens. I mean, I'll still turn up to the final and just watch it, because I don't mind. And Kyle read out the results, and I just couldn't believe it. The first name that he read out was Declan Evans, and I was like, I can't believe it. I went up there, I was like, it wouldn't sink in, and then obviously through to the final. Like I said, one of the best nights. You talk about best moments in comedy. I think it was just an insane. That was a packed out room. There was people. It was everyone was like sardines. There's people behind the little back the bar at the back of the room. There was people having to stand behind there. It was so full. Overall, just a great night. I come second, and I couldn't believe that. I wasn't even bothered. I was like, obviously, you only announced the top three, but I was kind of thinking, I don't care if I come seventh. It's just like I really don't. I'm happy with how I performed. I just wanted to come off and think, I put in a decent performance, and I did. So I was like, whatever happens, happens, and I was like absolutely over the moon to get second.
Because Kim won it, didn't she? And
Chris
Ford came third, I think. So it's quite funny because when I came to the semi-final, it was you, Jim Hooker, Deepak Patel, probably a few others as well that have all been on this podcast.
Yeah.
It's just like it's quite weird. Seeing people and stuff like that and chatting to them about stuff like this.
You invited me to go on the podcast this was back in this was about a month before the All Stars, I think, something like that maybe.
Yeah.
And then I think it was your suggestion to kind of wait to see how the All Stars final goes, and now finally here we are about 20 years later. Sorry about that.
He's just won his 6th All Stars.
Yeah.
2025 champion. You just never know. One thing I did want to kind of touch on is I'm pretty confident in saying this. You are probably the youngest. You are the youngest person I've had on here. What's the reaction of your friends and stuff when you said, I'm going to go and do stand up?
It's a weird thing because like I tried not to tell anyone for as long as I could, but then like no, some like my mates would kind of say, oh, what you've been up to or whatever, and I'm like, I might as well just tell them. They're gonna find out. I mean, maybe like in 10 years' time, if I make it to like Live at the Apollo and I've still not told anyone yet, there's a certain point that you get to where you have to kind of like just say I remember some of the first people. So obviously I mentioned where I work in a pub. I've done that pretty much since I was old enough to really. And the people that I work with in the pub, I love them to bits. They're like a nice little sort of family. And we've all sort of we've moved to different pubs all together, and I think I told some of them, were like the first people to really know. And it's a massive thing for me to kind of tell someone that, that I do stand up. I mean, some people ain't that, but like some people who do stand up ain't that bothered about it. They'll just sort of say, yeah, whatever, I do stand up, no big deal. But it takes me a lot to tell people, Yeah, I told a couple of my mates about it and some of my family as well. And you know what? It feels like a massive thing. It feels like, you're really sort of like building yourself up about it. You're getting yourself nervous to tell anyone about it. No one's asked. I'm not saying they're not bothered. They are. They're intrigued. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm saying is, no one kind of goes, you'd be no good at that, mate. What you doing and all that stuff. They're just they just kind of say, yeah, okay, good luck, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So another thing, it's kind of I always find that if you hear that someone's trying to get into stand-up comedy, I find it's like I don't know, I'm not good at maths. I can't put it into percentages, but there's like a 5% chance they'll be good. Right, it's a weird thing. There's a 5% chance they'll be good, and out of that 5%, there's like another 5% chance that you actually like them, like yourself. They'll be like your cup of tea. So when I kind of tell people that I'm sort of into stand up, it kind of like it don't, it's just something that I do. They don't. 99.9% of the people that I've told that I do stand up, like back home, they've never seen me. They don't know what I'm about. So
okay,
they're kind of like, yeah, good luck to you, mate. Whatever.
But I've always found it brings out the conversation in a lot of people, and it shocks people as well.
Yeah.
You say to somebody, if I say to somebody at work, what are you up to this evening? Oh, I'm off to do a gig, and they're kind of, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, who are you going to see?
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm doing a bit of a stand-up comedy, and they're like, really? Oh, what's that like? And you're like, you can't describe it.
Yeah. I get quite shy about it. I'm like, I don't really want to tell anyone. I sort of like, they go, when I get you into a corner and they kind of like, what you've been up to or whatever, and you kind of say, I was at a gig, the other night, or why can't you make this event on so and so? And I'm like, I can't, I've got a gig.
Yeah.
And you kind of, there's only a certain amount of times that you can go and see like Noel Gallagher. You know what I mean? It's like, blimey, he sees him quite a lot. He's a massive fan. And it's like eventually you kind of have to say, listen, look, I'm doing stand up, whatever. And it feels like a bit of a weight off your shoulders, because then it's like, especially like with your mates or whatever, or you sort of like people that you work with, and that, they're like, oh, okay, that's what he gets up to. That's why he's always in London every other day.
Greetings, listener. Sorry for the interruption. It's John Payne from episode 41. If, like me, you're loving this episode, in the hot tub with 9 merchant sailors, listen to your higher self, consider giving it a 5-star rating, and follow the pod on whatever app you're using. It's the right thing to do, right, lads? And Mark will be forever grateful. Now, our helicopter has arrived, so I must beg your leave. But please, enjoy the rest of this absolute humdinger of an episode.
Also, I was just thinking about with you're saying you do a lot of G&B stuff and all of that, but you recently did a night away from G&B, but with a rather famous MC.
Oh yeah. It was.
You did. You told me about
it. I forgot I mentioned it to you. It was on last Thursday night. It was there's a restaurant in Covent Garden called Gilgamesh, and they put on a comedy night. It was their first ever comedy night. Basically, the main person, the headline person that was like comparing it, was Lee Francis in character as Myrtle Holden. Now, most people will know him as Keith Lemon, you know, off the telly, of like Celebrity Juice and that. I got invited, Liam McGough, who does stand-up comedy. I see him at a gig. It wasn't even that long ago. It was maybe about 3 weeks ago or something. And we sort of we had a drink afterwards, went down the pub, and were just chatting away about comedy and all that. And he sent me a message the next day. He said like, oh, you know, he sent me the poster for it, and I had no idea because Lee Francis, he's in character as Myrtle Holden, so he's like an old woman. It's a bit like Mrs. Brown, you know, from Mrs. Brown's Boys. But like, and I was like, I have no idea who that is, you know, and and I sort of like, you know, I said like, yeah, that'll be great, you know, I'll do that gig. And afterwards I was like, I might look up who this person is. And I was like, no way, you know. Yeah, got there on Thursday. I mean, Lee was like one of the first people that I met when I sort of got down there. He was having his dinner and he shook my hand. And I sort of like, I sort of thought of making a joke or something. I thought I was saying like, fuck me, I'm on my way up or you on your way down kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, do you know anything about gas ovens and all that, you know, that old joke? But it's like, but I didn't, I was really like sort of polite to him and all that. And he was really nice bloke and he was like very polite. And we just talked about the weather for like 5 minutes or whatever, like. And I was pretending I didn't know who he was. Like, I'm not saying I pretend like I disregard or anything like that, but like I kind of just went, I just treat him like any other sort of person, really. And the gig was like, it was like loads of like really sort of, it was a really posh place, you know, and it was like for all these like people that paid like a lot of money for like a 3-course meal, and you're going on after they've like eaten, so they're kind of like full up. And I was first on, and so Lee obviously he did a little bit of material, and then he did a bit of sort of like MCing and whatnot. But he you know, he brought me onto the stage, and it was very different, you know, from any other sort of gig that I've done. It's not like a comedy club or a pub. It was like this restaurant where there is nothing really out in front of you. There's tables along the side of you, and then kind of the distance, you know, circular tables. And there was a lot of people. Most of them weren't even there for comedy. You know, they were
right.
And there were some people sort of on their phones. The table right at the back was chatting. But you know something, I've done well. You know, that's what I can say. I've done well with like a lot of it is out of your hands. You know, if the audience isn't listening to you, you know, it's not your fault, you know, and all that. But then there was a lot of the audience come up to me afterwards and said that, you know, they enjoyed my set, and that's a winner for me, you know what I mean? I love that.
Oh yeah, I
really enjoyed it, and it was a good gig, you know. So stayed out afterwards, going out. I stayed out with Liam afterwards. We sort of went round a couple of pubs, a couple of clubs night, and it was a good night overall.
So what was it? What's it like? Because you're stood in front and watching a famous pro comic, in effect, doing his stuff. And was there anything you kind of looked at and thought the way he's doing something or whatever?
That room was nearly impossible, you know, to try and get something out of. He done really well. He was going round all the tables, talking to people. That's what I couldn't do, you know. Yet, you know, I'm like not to that stage yet. It was a real natural. You know, we've chatted, we've going around the tables and chatting to people, you know, and he's got quite a sort of like dirty sense of humour and all that, and it was like, and it sort of broke the ice with a lot of people, and he was brilliant. You can tell like he was so kind of relaxed and calm, and so just like it was brilliant, and all the acts were brilliant too. So yeah,
nice one. With your joke writing then, what you've kind of alluded to it already, but what's the first joke you ever wrote, which you said you haven't told?
Yeah, it was see, the thing is, right, is with this joke in particular, I've never told it on stage. It would not fit in with my whatever it is. Like, I'm a one-liner, you know what I mean? But this is a different joke. This was when you got to think, I was only about 17 years old. I was trying to find I didn't know what my style was going to be. I was like, took all my influences, and it's like a massive sort of it's like this massive formula of all these different comedians going on in your head, and you have no idea what you want to do, you know, kind of thing. And this joke, it was, I ain't going to tell you what it is. No, because like I tell you what, in person, right, when I see you next, I'll tell you like what it is and all that, and I'll talk you through it. But it's one of those jokes where maybe I'll tell it one day, maybe I won't, I don't know, maybe I'll just give it to someone else, you know, someone that it would suit better. But I looking back now, I think it's a real it's sort of doing a bit of a funny voice, just give you a bit of an outline. It's sort of like a sketch almost, you know. It's sort of I sort of point something out, you know, make a bit of an observation about something, and then I go into a bit of a kind of like just doing an impression of a certain sort of like person that you see on the telly kind of thing.
Okay.
And I could sit here and say like, oh, you know, I think it's a really good joke, but you know, you could go on stage and it could get nothing. You know, people could be watching. You know, people. It's a fascinating thing about comedy. I could try and do that joke, and I could do the voice and all that, and it's like I could get really awkward looks and just complete silence. You know, so. But it's the first joke that I wrote where I kind of thought, you know what, I've got something going on here. If I can kind of try and sort of push on, build on it, then that'd be great.
Yeah. What was the first joke you ever told?
First joke I ever told was it was a bust-up joke. When I went on stage at the Cav, like I was saying earlier on, I had such bad stage presence. The mic was too far away from my mouth. You know, like they couldn't really hear what I was saying, so I was basically just talking into the room. And the first joke I told was the one where I say like, oh, it took me ages getting here tonight. You know, I stood at a bus stop. There was a pregnant lady next to me. I said to her, when's it due? And she said, it's due in about 3 weeks. And I thought, fuck me, I ain't waiting that long. So I walked instead. And it's like, I did that joke and it got a laugh. And I was like, I didn't know how to react. So I think back then it was like, I didn't know what to do when they were laughing. Because I never, not sound too sort of like negative, but I didn't think they'd laugh. I thought when I'm no, it's not that. But when I was practicing beforehand, I was like, you know, okay, so do the punchline, move on to the next joke. I didn't actually consider you have to stand there like awkwardly waiting for like them to finish laugh. I'm all right with it now, but back then it's like it's one of those things that you don't even think of until you get up there, you know. But that was my first joke that I've done anyway.
There's one thing that's always intrigued me. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of comedians that when they've written stuff and they go and they look back at their first ever stuff they've ever written and gone, oh no, that wasn't very good, that was rubbish and all of that. I'd love to see a night put on where comedians can only come on and do their first ever jokes.
Brilliant. I'd love that. Yeah, I'd do it. Yeah. Some of the jokes are my first sort of ever routine. See, I do a sort of, I'm massive into the whole idea of the type 5. So all you're doing really is you're just keeping it the same and you go on and on and on every gig and it changes very, very subtly. You know, you take one joke out, put one joke. There's comedians out there on the open mic circuit that'll go up and do a completely different, like new 5-minute set. I don't understand those people, you know. It's all about getting the type 5 together and then you can build on that. Eventually you'll get to 7, 8s and 10, 12s. But like I was always sort of going on with the same sort of routine. I kept doing it over and over again and very sort of subtly over time it was changing a little bit. And by the time you get to kind of like, you know, for example, when I found G&B, you know, it was only like 10 gigs later, all of a sudden my material, I look back to my first ever gig and there's only like, say if there's like 14 jokes in it, probably 7 of them I was still doing when I come to G&B. And now from my first ever gig, I don't think any of them are still in my, well, none of them are in my type 5 now, you know, but if I do a longer sort of set, like more pushing 10 minutes, maybe 1 or 2 of them would get in. But it's interesting what you say, because about when people talk about their first ever gigs, I think one of the things with me is that I was chatting to Cole about this the other day. Because I first decided that I wanted to get into stand when I was 14, I was too young to go to like comedy clubs. I was too young to kind of like go out and do it straight away. So I was sort of like, I was just writing material, you know, from like at home. You know, I just sit up at night, you know, my light would always be, I'd fall asleep with my light on, with a notepad just sort of like falling onto the floor.
Yeah.
And it's just write all the time. And by the time that I was, not even by the time I was old enough, by the time I actually could go out because of COVID and all that, by the time I could actually go out and do my first ever gig, that was like, what must be like, I don't know, 19 or something. So like a good 5 years of like building up to it, you know, just writing material. But you take someone, now there's most comedians, you know, that suddenly decide they want to be a stand-up comedian when they're in their 30s and 40s, you know. And it's like, okay, so that person that's in there, that's an adult, they can decide they want to be a stand-up comedian. They will write some material and then they'll go out and do it. You know what I mean? It's like they don't have to wait for anything. They've got freedom to kind of go out and do it. And if you're excited about it and you want to kind of do it, then they will, you know. So it's almost like just a massive advantage to me was actually not being allowed to go out and do the gig yet when I first decided. And so... but that's the whole thing about the material on the first like ever gig kind of thing. Most people would be like, you know, you kind of wouldn't really go back to that material ever again. And it's like, but there's a couple of jokes in my first like ever gig, and I do go back to them now and again.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So when it comes to writing jokes, then do you have a particular way of doing it? Is it a case of something comes into your head, make a note, or you sit down and literally go, right, I'm going to write these jokes now? What you do nowadays rather than what you did back then?
I can't sit down and write material. I can't just decide that I'm going to go and sit down and write some material today. A lot of people can do that. You know, I don't understand it. All of the material that I've ever done, it's all just from stuff that I've just thought of. Like, and it could be sort of any moment of the day. You know, I could be sort of in the shower. I could be sort of walking down the road. It's usually right when I've gone to bed and I've switched the light off. And that's it now. I'm going to go to sleep. And then my brain's kind of like working away. And all of a sudden, my brain's going, yeah, it's a good joke, isn't it? And I'm kind of thinking, no, brain, it's time to go to sleep. And I'm like thinking, no, that's a rubbish joke. That's a rubbish joke. And I'm thinking, actually, I better write that down. So I've lost countless amounts of sleep from having to put my light back on, get the notepad out, and just write like loads of random sort of ideas and that. So I can't decide I'm going to write. I just wait for it to come to me. It's a bit like I see it as it's a lot like going fishing. So you could sit there by the side and nothing will come. Nothing. You could sit there for hours and hours and hours, nothing will come, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it would just fall out of the sky. Well, not fish, obviously, but it would like it's just out of nowhere. Something will come to you. With any luck, it'll be any good, and with any luck, it'll get a laugh as well. And then there you go. But so that's just me. I can't really write. I can write and I can read and write, believe it or not. But I can't sit down and just come up with anything.
Yeah.
It's all. I think I said this to you when I saw you a couple of weeks ago. A lot of stuff's already in my brain from years ago, like from when I was when I was like a kid. Just stuff like I sort of like see on the telly, and it's sort of without you knowing, it's sort of in your head. And it just sits there and it hides in the corner for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden it'll come back to you one day. That happens to me quite a bit,
So what's your favourite joke that you've written? And I keep saying this, but it's not necessarily your best one, but it's the one you enjoy the most. I
like going for a sort of when I'm going for a job at a building site, and I kind of say like this whole thing about can you make tea? Can you operate a forklift? Fuck me, how big's the kettle? That one. It's one of those jokes. It's that one. There's a couple.
You're gonna have to say that properly, and not. You're gonna have to say that one properly because people might. Yeah.
Oh right, yeah. All right, okay. So it's like a gig in its own. I remember going for my first ever job when I was about 17. Went to the building site. Went to the boss. Said, "Excuse me, mate, got any jobs going?" He said, "Can you make tea?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can you operate a forklift?" I said, "Fuck me, how big's the kettle?" And it's just one of those jokes where it's like I could just switch off when I'm telling that joke. I've told that joke a lot to the point where it's muscle memory, and I can kind of go on autopilot when I tell it. It's not just that one. There's a few others as well where I can think about like plan what I've got coming up after this joke, and it just rolls off the tongue. And it's just like that's why I like it. It requires the least amount of effort, like when you got a new joke where you've got to really think about it, think about the words.
But that's a really good point towards having that type 5. If you know that type 5, you can do what you just did. And you can just roll with it. Your brain and your mouth your mouth's saying the words because it knows it, but your brain isn't thinking about what you're saying.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
And you can then you can use that time that your mouth is talking to be preparing for the next one or looking around the room at whatever else is going on. But your mouth is still going forklift, blah blah blah. You're just like, yeah, you've nailed it, absolutely nailed it. I think that's the biggest advocate for having that type 5. So you've been on the open mic circuit for a while then.
Yeah.
So what's the is there one thing you'd like to see change?
I don't see. I was trying to think about this, but nothing really comes to mind, right? But one thing I would say is like I've already sort of I've bigged him up already, but I like to say Kyle. 2 things about him: he knows what he's talking about, but also he really genuinely cares for you. And he wants what's best for you. And I think, it's people like that kind of, they're sort of, he's a one in a million, and he sort of, I'd love if there was more people like that. There might be, you know, but I kind of think there's a lot of the open mic comedy scene feels like it's every man for their own. You know, you're in it to, you know, it's like a bit of a rat race, you know, and you kind of you're fighting to get sort of get noticed and all that stuff. And there's a lot of club and people that won't actually help you. You can form at their gig, but that's it, you know. But there's you know, it's so nice. Like take someone like Kyle who would sit down with me and he'd go over like so much stuff that I can improve on. You know, he's like all the time he says to me like, oh, you know, you need to change the wording of that a little bit. You need to stop doing this. You need to start doing that. You know, and it's and I will, if someone say offers me a gig, you know, I'll say to him like, oh, do you know so and so? You know, they've offered me this gig. You know, what do you reckon? And he'll give me his opinion. And it's very handy to have someone like that you know that obviously knows a lot of people as well. So I can always go to him. And it's like, you know, he was delighted when he heard about my gig from last Thursday at Gilgamesh with Lee. You know, and he said to me, grab the opportunity with both hands. You know, and it's just I always kind of like I always chat to him before sort of making any decisions about anything. So to answer your question, like I'd like there to be more people that know what they're talking about as well. You know, that sort of because there's a lot of people like that. I think a lot of us need guidance. You know, I know I kind of do. You know, because there's one thing I've got my material, I've got my sort of stage persona, which I've kind of like I'm working on. That's kind of like that's half of it. You know, you need to have people that are going to really kind of support you, give you constructive criticism and sort of guide you along the road, you know, nicely. So I think apart from that, I can't really think about anything. I saw you like the one before last podcast with Kevin. I heard you was both talking about you wish there was a clock at the back of the room, something like that. I was like, that's all well and good, but you know, it's part of it. You've got to learn to almost time yourself. You know, you've got to kind of, because if you start, touch wood, you know, if it all goes well, you know, if you start sort of doing gigs in theatres and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
You know, you've got to have a good sort of learning how long 5 minutes actually is. It's part of like the tight five in itself, really. You know, like you should be able to kind of do it without a light. You know what I mean? So it's stuff like it's almost it's stuff that we wish was there. I wish there was a clock at the back of the room as well. Do you know what I mean? Like I really do. Everything's like a learning curve, and all the little kind of things that aren't ideal. It does do you like a few favours because it kind of toughens you up a little bit. You know what I mean?
I agree to a certain point. I think with the clock thing is one of those where if you ask any new comic that's involved, what don't you want to do? And the first thing most people probably say is, I don't want to piss the promoter off. But they're still so new that they don't actually know how long each part of their set is. And I'm the same.
Yeah.
I get to a point where I go, right, that first bit is about 2 minutes long, and the next bit is about 2 minutes long.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, so that gives me, I've got a 7 coming up, so I've got another 2 that I can bolt onto that. That gives me 6, a minute for messing about or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, that felt good. And then I did the gig. And then the promoter sent me a message the next day because I was doing another gig for him the next day. He said, how do you keep time? I was just like, I know I overran. He went, you went to 9.5 instead of 7. I was just like, I know.
Yeah.
But I was trying new stuff. And he was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. He said, but some people aren't as forgiving as such. But knowing, I always think that if you're on the stage and you can look up and you go, okay, I've just done that first bit and it's 2 minutes 30. Immediately your brain's gone, right, this next bit might have to be cut, and you cut it on the fly and know that you're cutting it on the fly. But you can cut it in a position where it doesn't detract from the end part, because we're all trying to get to the end. And I just think having those little, everything as part of open mic comedy is learning this and learning that. And after a while, you'll become good at knowing what your 5 is and when you're ending. But just having that little hint and not having the light, because I find the light is really distracting.
Yeah.
Because you're in that situation. I think I mentioned it to Kevin, is that you get somebody flashes a light at you, and then they'll flash the same light at you again if you've gone over. And if you haven't seen the first one, you think the second one's the first one.
Yeah.
And you think, I've still got a minute left. It's like, no, you've not. Because I think it was Angel, when I performed Angel, what they did was they did a white light for a minute left and a red light for time.
Oh, okay.
And that was really handy because you knew, there was no doubt. Thankfully, I didn't overrun, but it was nice knowing that there is that point there and as a good reference.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree. As you get into it more, and you know how long your sets are, and you know where the funny is. And I always think there's no harm in running under time, because you're showing respect in a way to other acts. Because if you overrun, then you're putting somebody else on a bit later. And you know, if you're in a situation where you've got 10 comics on, and somebody goes, "Oh, I'm only going. If I overrun, it'll only be 2 minutes." Yeah, but if everybody overruns by 2 minutes,
yeah, totally.
You know, you're 20 minutes, half an hour into later finishing.
Yeah, it's better to go under than over, definitely. Yeah, no, it's true what you say. Like, it's this weird thing where you got a rough idea of how long your sort of jokes kind of last for, and then all of a sudden you find yourself not even timing yourself. You go, that's 5 minutes. So if I take those 2 jokes out and put that one joke in, which is a little bit longer, and it's like, okay, so then all of a sudden you're doing this weird maths thing. But I usually just sort of. I usually just play to the light, I know roughly I know what my last joke is, and I know the one before that, so it's like, if I see the light, I'll just sort of wrap things up, I did, but like you say, it's if you're starting out, and you're a new open mic comedian, it is, the timing thing is a bit of a kind of like, that's where the clock would come in handy, wouldn't it,
I think it would. Just for the ease of the night. But I agree that when you get to a certain level or certain point, if that's 100 gigs or 150 gigs or whatever else, and you've stepped up to doing 7s and 10s, you should then know what your 5 is.
Yeah.
But from the very, very start, it's almost like a way to help the night run smoothly and keep everybody on track as well. Yeah. But no, so your takeaway really is find the good people and stick with the good people.
Yeah. Oh,
Listen
definitely.
to the good people.
It's like anything in life, really. I think it is literally a case of just go around, try loads of different comedy clubs and try lots of different people. There's 1 or 2 comedians which I've got like on Instagram or something. I'll look at their story. They're doing a different gig every night, in all these different places, and they're just like in front of it's almost like the same gig over and over again, just in a different town or city. And that's a great way to learn. But I find that you need to find someone that's going to kind of give you a little bit of guidance. You need to find a certain place. I found that with G&B. It's just it's somewhere. It's like a home, really. I call it a school of comedy. You go to school. You're learning and all that, and it's like your home. And you go out and do other gigs, and then come back. Go back home, and kind of if there's any sort of problems or anything, it's a good place to be, and it's a good place to kind of like reflect and go on there and just try stuff, It's about getting the wording right for all your jokes and all that, and stage presence. It's a nice place to kind of just learn the art, simple as that. And you mentioned everything but the gags workshop that I do as well. I found that really handy. Once you've done it once, you can kind of go back and just watch it like for free. And I've gone back a couple of times, so it comes in handy so well,
So if things do go really well then with you in stand-up, which I'm sure they will, because everybody I've spoken to said you're onto good things here.
Thank you very much.
And Live at the Apollo come knocking, and they sit down with you and ask you, what music do you want to walk onto the stage to? What do you pick?
I don't know. Cigarettes and Alcohol by Oasis, just because it's a tune.
It's a tune. It's current.
I tell you what, I'm not too bothered about walk on whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just sort of go and sweat. Like, I think I'd feel a bit sort of like not embarrassed by walk on music. It's really bigging you up, innit? Like,
it can do.
It's a massive thing. I like sort of just like sneaking on stage, shaking hands with whoever who's going in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Getting to the mic and just saying, hello.
The reason I like the idea of walk on music, especially at open mic level, is that it takes away from the silence. There's always that silence where people are clapping, welcoming you on stage, but they inevitably stop clapping before you've reached the microphone.
You
get 1, maybe 2 seconds of silence while you're fumbling about getting the microphone out the stand. If music was playing and there was some guy who was there with the faders going, the music's in, when he's got the mic in his hand and the stand is moved, then the music comes off. and you've kind of filled that void. Because I find that void really, really awkward. That's partly.
I know. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
That's partly why I wear the T-shirt sometimes, because it's such a distraction, and it doesn't give the silence. Because once people see it, they laugh, and it allows me a few seconds to fumble about and get myself ready.
Yeah. So
yeah, and as you've alluded to already, you've listened to quite a few of these podcasts and episodes, so you know what's coming up next. So I'd like to set you the Comedians Challenge, which I think would be
right. That's all we've got time for, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning in. See you next week. Yeah. Right, let's get this over and done with.
Yeah, the Comedians Challenge is to read a joke from this book called The Little Book of Shit Jokes by Sid Finch. For anybody that's new that doesn't know what I'm talking about, is this book is full of shit jokes, and I'd like the comedians to read one of these jokes out when they're live on stage, record it, tag us in it on Instagram, and all of that kind of funky stuff. And they can do the joke however they want. But the thing is, they pick the joke by page number, so they don't know what they're going to get, and I don't know what they're going to get. And it's up to them to see how they weave it into a set of theirs. So, Declan, I'm assuming yes, because these jokes are right up your street.
What are you trying to say?
They're short and sweet.
You charmer.
So if you can give a number between 5 and 95.
I'm going to go for... Blimey, this is the easiest bit. I'm struggling on this. 27.
Okay. Yeah, this is up your street. The joke I want you to tell on stage, I'll send you a picture of it so you can... you don't have to write it down, is my aunt has never smoked a day in her life. She normally gets tired around dusk.
Right, okay. So I've got to say that on stage.
Yeah.
Okie.
You might have to change it slightly to make it a bit more obvious what's trying to be said, because I've only just got it myself.
Oh no, I was waiting for the punch.
My aunt has never smoked a day in her life. She normally gets tired around dusk.
Yeah.
Don't use dusk.
Yeah.
Use something else.
I was literally, as soon as you said that, I was trying to picture myself saying it on the stage, and I was like, I don't know.
There's a lot of silence in there.
I'll do it for you. Yeah. I'll do it. As soon as I know you, I'll do it for you. Do you know what's funny? Paul Little.
Yeah.
Because I listened to his podcast on here as well, and but just before it got uploaded, right? So I didn't know that he was on this, right? And I saw him at a gig, and he went on stage and he did this one joke in particular, right? And it was something about an electricity bill or something like that. I can't remember, right?
Yeah.
And I went up to him afterwards. I said, "You've been on Mark Cox's podcast, haven't you?" And he goes, "Yeah, I have." What's funny about Paul Little is so down to earth, with his humour. And he, when he done the joke, which was part of the challenge, once he'd done it, he said afterwards to the crowd, he said, I was dared to do that joke. And then he goes, and he goes, "They're not all dares."
That's the beautiful thing about all of this, is how people incorporate it, and then they make like that bit. They're not all dares. I think is just it's a beautiful tag onto the whole thing. And it's you guys that are really quite clever in how you do these things. And I mean, every joke that comes out of here is pretty crap. There's been a couple of little good ones, but yeah, you've drawn a very, very short straw on that. I'm not sure if the audience are actually going to... You might have to adjust it slightly to something...
I tell you what, drawing a short straw from the book of shit jokes, that really is a short straw, isn't it?
It is.
But... Yeah, I'll try and work that in. Well, it might take me a bit of a while.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, we'll find a way.
Cool. So where can people find you then, and online and stuff, to see where you're gigging?
I am on Instagram as Declan Evans Comedy. I've got a TikTok page, but I've only ever uploaded one video. I think I was at a pub quiz joke.
Yeah.
That was a while ago now, about a year ago maybe. I've got to go back on there and sort of put some more stuff on. I will do that coming up in the next couple of weeks maybe, before this gets put out. But I'm Declan Evans, just Declan Evans on TikTok.
Okay.
You can find me on Facebook. You can find me in Essex. You can find me at G&B.
Yeah. You
can find me in Only Fools and Horses if you like. And I'd just probably Instagram's probably the best
Yeah.
bet. If you sort of send me, I'm not too good with like, despite my age, I ain't too good with like technology and social media and all that stuff. So I could do with someone doing it for me,
Yeah.
but it's like, it's a bit of they're just sort of like, I suppose Instagram really is what I would be most
Cool. I'll put the links to TikTok and Instagram in the podcast description so people can find you straight away. You can find us on Instagram at Open Mic Comedy Pod. We've got a website, openmiccomedypod.com. Whichever platform you're listening to this on, please give it a follow, subscribe, whatever they call it. A like, a rating would be great as well. Little review helps us get up the charts a little bit more and gets these people, lovely comedians I'm speaking to every week, listen to in a bigger audience. Thank you very much for your time today, Declan.
Thank you very much. Right, you did remember to press record, right?
I did. And
let's go through that all over again. And I tell you what, if we had to do that over again when we get to the shit jokes book, I'd pick a different number. But there you go.
And
listen, thanks very much for having me on. Fantastic podcast. I've listened to many of your episodes, and it's great. It's just great to be invited to be on, and we got here eventually.
Yes.
I know, I think we first spoke about it quite a number of months ago.
Yeah.
But listen, thanks very much for having me on, and I'll see you around soon.
Thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate it. And for the rest of you out there, I'll speak to you all